Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Performance and Finance Scrutiny Committee meeting for the 13th of September. Have we got any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. I've received apologies from Councillor Louise Ashbury, Councillor Sashi Malvaganam, and Councillor Jacques Olmo. Councillor Rob Lee is subbing for Councillor Jacques Olmo, and Councillor Sabi Kang is subbing for Councillor Louise Ashbury.
Thank you for that. In the case, if there's an emergency or a fire, we're not expecting a fire drill, just head to the car park and we'll meet you there. So, the minutes from the previous meeting. Have we got any comments, feedback from those minutes?
Just to mention, Chair, Councillor Bob Rakes is showing in the minutes as not attending. He, in fact, attended, so those will be amended accordingly.
Okay, thank you. Do you want me to sign these as is? Thank you. Next item, any declarations of interest? Okay, so I'm not seeing any hands. So the first item on the agenda, we're going to mix the agenda up a bit for various reasons. So we're going to start with the Treasury Management Activity Report, Q1, as the first item. Then we're going to go to Executive Portfolio Update, Economic and Income Development. Then we'll go back to the original schedule. So that means we'll be starting with the Treasury Management Activity Report.
Thank you, Chair. So in a world of fluctuating and at times quite volatile interest rates, sound Treasury management is an absolute priority to ensure the long-term sustainability of any organisation. This report before you today is published in order to comply with the requirements as set out by the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, or CIPFA's Treasury Management Code, which the Council is obligated to do. As you all know, there are two sides to raising interest rates. We have funding needs, and in those funding needs we'll be paying more in interest, whether that's taking out new loans or servicing our variable rate short-term loans. But obviously any savings or cash balances which we don't need immediately can be placed in facilities to also earn some interest income. Since Q1, we have also seen even higher interest rates throughout the UK, with the Bank of England base rate now at 5.25%. And clearly, the short-term loans, since this report has been published, have also been rolled forward at the higher rates. Total borrowing in Q1 equals £176 million, with 100 million of that in long-term facilities, which is with a weighted average of 2.73%, and 77 million in short-term loans with a weighted average of 3.45%. Our investments total 15.3 million. The Council have appointed a link group to advise on Treasury strategy and help support our thinking. And you can see the latest loans that we have in the detail in Appendix 1 to these papers. Any questions?
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. I think from reading the Treasury report, it seems pretty obvious that the Council's got effectively an existential challenge because of just sheer level of borrowing that we've got. This all stems back, as we know, from 2016, when there was failures in decision-making, in oversight and in scrutiny. But I wonder if there's also been a failure in Treasury management in the period after 2016, while interest rates were still low. I don't know if this is a question for you, Leanne, or from Bob, but wouldn't it have been better if one of your predecessors had refinanced the short-term loans into a longer maturity loan when really low interest rates were available? It seems like the key problem that the Council has now, threatening its very existence, is this huge exposure to short-term interest rates.
So I would agree in with that benefit of hindsight. I mean, clearly the short-term loans are more subject to interest rate volatility. We would, if we could now, transfer some of those short-term loans into longer-term roads, but we also need a balanced portfolio between long and short. And now is not the time to put more borrowing into long-term because they're at an extremely high level. And we don't want to obviously put the council in another 50 years worth of high loans. So it doesn't really answer your question in entirety, but I'd say.
No, that's great, thanks. Would Bob like to add anything to this? I know it's before your time as well, Bob, but if one of your predecessors had managed these loans differently, we wouldn't have the existential crisis that we have now.
Mr Wilson, do you want to?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Yes, it was before my time. I came into the situation, but I have, in previous councils, been involved around the Treasury side on similar sort of investment type deals. The advice that was given at the time, and at the time the report was written, that the decision on Treasury is always delegated to the Section 151 officer who is in charge of the council's Treasury function. The advice that was taken by the advisors, or given by the advisors at the time, was to actually keep borrowing at low rates because rates were historically low on short-term loans, and rolled it over as long as you can, keep rolling over, was actually more beneficial than locking in 40, 50 years at a higher rate. Again, a low higher rate, but it was certainly a lot higher in terms of we were borrowing at the time on short term about 0.1%. And for each year you roll that over, you're saving a lot of money as opposed to borrowing longer term. My own view, and the view that I established when I was my previous council, was we need to find a trigger point where we felt that rates were either rising or that the long-term debt had come down. When I arrived here, we had already agreed and forward dealt to long-term loans of £50 million. So that gave us a balance of about £100 million in long-term debt at reasonably low rates compared to what we're seeing now, and the rest on short-term. The reason why you need to keep a portfolio that's balanced like that is you don't know whether the opportunity might come along to actually dispose of an asset. And because, although we don't link our loans directly to assets like with a mortgage, it's not asset-backed loans. We borrow based on our general credit rating, which is the same as UK governments. We would absolutely like to have the ability to take out some of the debt if we received a capital receipt. Now, if you locked in 50-year money on all long-term loans, and then suddenly you sell some of the assets because you get that absolute bargain deal, it's very difficult to then justify why you've got 50 years of debt and no asset behind it. So you have a mix between long-term and short-term.
Thanks. I totally understand. Thank you.
Thank you both. Any more questions? Councillor Quinn.
So the report mentions how the council tries to invest in ethical investments wherever possible. Now it's the words wherever possible that slightly concern me. Now looking at the report, there's nothing in there that looks particularly concerning, but is the council satisfied that its investments score highly in terms of environmental, social and corporate governance? Thank you.
I'm going to pass that over to Mr. Watson. That's not something I have dealt too much with as yet.
Mr Watson.
Thank you very much, Chansky, and thank you, Chair. The quote, wherever possible, is because generally when we invest, we tend to invest with other local authorities or with the government. So I would assume the government has an ethical policy around it. The wherever possible comes in with money put in money market funds. And I will say money market funds at this point are used mainly because they're AAA rated and they're safe. The primary security or primary principle around our investments of our money is the security of that money. A AAA rated money market fund is the best way we can go. That gives us an element of return. The trouble is money market funds are huge. They invest in many diverse portfolios. So I can't go out and check whether the current money market fund we're investing in is totally ethical. but that's why I have wherever possible in there.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Any more questions? Speak now. There's no one online, is there? No? Okay. Okay, thank you. I have no other questions. Was that just to be noted? Okay, and that's going to the next executive, is it not? I believe?
It is.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for your time and safe journey to Newcastle. Okay, so following on for the revised agenda, the next item is item 6, economic and income development.
Thanks, Sean. The Property and Economic Development team currently consists of 20 members of staff, 10 of whom have been recently appointed within the last 12 months. The team is now fully staffed, which has enhanced the capability and resilience of the service greatly. Key areas covered by the service include regeneration, economic development, office and industrial portfolio, leisure and community properties, facilities and building management, and retail and asset management. Up to this point, key missions for the Property and Economic Development Service have been delivering budgeted net income from the property portfolio, looking at key regeneration projects, namely the London Road Block and the House of Fraser building, producing a business case for the potential relocation of Surrey Heath Borough Council and the redevelopment of the land east of Knoll Road, enhancing the property management of the leisure and community properties and identifying surplus land and properties, and providing ambitious roadmaps for good growth and prosperity in the local community. In terms of the targets set by our short-term plan and the annual plan, the team are either on target or have completed everything outlined. A key challenge for the team has been finding a development partner for the London Road Block. Following an extensive procurement process and no formal bids received, the officers obtained detailed feedback from 28 developers, which has allowed the team to revise a tactical plan to look to progress a developer search, which could potentially include a phased approach. This detailed feedback has enabled the team to ensure that plans for the project are now more cost effective. More information regarding this project can be found within your report packs. The regeneration team have also worked on a number of key projects, including finding alternative plans for the House of Fraser building following its closure in May 2023, investigating the potential relocation of Surrey Heath Borough Council, the Pembroke Broadway Public Realm project, to name just a few. Details of these projects are also outlined in your full report. The Economic Development team have been working towards project from the 2023 to 2028 Economic Development Strategy, published in March 2023. The strategy outlines 6 key priority projects, which are delivering inward investment and business retention, accelerating high-speed digital connectivity, boosting SME skills, productivity and business performance, assuring the appeal and vibrancy of Camberley Town Centre, enhancing the economies of the villages and rural areas, and developing active travel infrastructure. The team also have received 3 years' worth of UK Shared Prosperity Fund monies and are working towards project in their second financial year. Many of these projects linking to priorities listed in the 5-year strategy document, annual plan and the short-term plan. A list of Year 2 projects are outlined in your report pack. The workshop, based in the town centre, opened its doors to even more residents in Surrey Heath in 2023, originally helping 18 to 24-year-olds into employment and now helping anybody over the age of 18. The workshop assists with getting people into work, particularly those on benefits. It offers more practical help, such as mock interviews, CV writing and advice. And the workshop was originally funded by the DWP until March 2023 and is currently funded by government COVID outbreak management funds until March 2024. Vacancy rates within the square are currently lower than the national average and is currently consistent of 53 independent businesses. The office and portfolio team recently secured their biggest letting of the year to the Surrey Heath community providers, taking 8,230 square feet. This service performance report gives much more in-depth analysis and the Property and Economic Development team, but in the meantime, I welcome any questions regarding the report submitted this evening.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Councillor Mears.
Thank you, Chair. Page 155, 5.1.2. I'm wondering what's the nature of the relationship we have with these businesses, and thus what are we hoping to achieve by engaging with these companies? And on the note of ethics, I noticed there's a defence and arms manufacturer in there. Are these the type of businesses we want to be developing relationships with?
Well, they are businesses within our remit, so we want to forge relationships with all of these businesses. They are employers. They do contribute to Surrey Heath in a positive way. Therefore, it's only right that we engage with those businesses.
Can I just take that on then? When we say engage, what does that actually mean? Because that could mean just talking to them. So once we have engaged, what does that mean?
So we're opening up conversations with them to see how we can work positively together, how we can help them in terms of recruitment, and just to have that excellent working relationship. These people employ a lot of people within our borough, and obviously with the development of our workshop, there are things we can do to be helping people into employment. So we're engaging in that way initially, but we're hoping that these are going to be long-term fruitful relationships.
Okay, thank you. And any other questions? Councillor Quinn.
So at 4.2, it talks about the House of Fraser building and how House of Fraser have left that building. But as I understood it, that wasn't the only business in that building. There was also Cafe Nero. That's not mentioned here. Now, I heard through no official sources that when House of Fraser closed, Cafe Nero were interested in remaining open and still using that site. And so is that the case, and why are they not mentioned in this report at all? Thank you.
The building, quite simply, isn't set up to have one retailer on that bottom floor, so there would need to be extensive redevelopment of that ground floor to allow somebody to trade in there without customers being able to access the rest of the building. So that's simply the reason why they haven't moved back into that premises yet.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Mears.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few, so do you want me to go one by one? Or
Yeah, if you want to go through them, if you just point us in the right direction of the page, it'd be quite handy. Thank you.
Fine, thanks. Page 159, 6.5. First of all, I commend the work that's done at the workshop. I think it's really good that we're helping younger people get into employment. It'd be great to see it remain successful. What are the long-term plans you have for the workshop? 160, 7.1.3. It states that Montagu Evans handed over close to £800,000 worth of arrears. What percentage of those have since been collected since handing over to Praxis? Page 165, Appendix 214. When we'll be able to see the report that's mentioned, and will it be published to the public? And page 166, number 2. Making council property work. Is the new function mentioned in that referring to the Town Centre Operational Management Group? If not, what's the new function?
It's a lot for me to remember there, Lewis.
Sorry, if you want me to go over them again, I don't
we might
mind.
have to
I
hit
appreciate
them
that's a lot.
one at a time.
Sure.
Okay. Long-term plans for the workshop obviously need to be discussed and brought to executive, but at the moment it's certainly going to be operational until the end of the funding period, and then we'll look to see whether or not it's the best use of council finances and whether it's providing the best best outcomes for the people using the service. The praxis question, I'm going to have to refer to my officers.
Who's going to want to take that one on? Mike. Alice on the call. Alice, can you hear us?
Hi everyone. Hi councillors. Hi. I can hear you. I don't have the figure to hand. Wasn't aware that was going to be a question this evening, so happy to provide that after the call or as part of the minutes. I can refer to Kel tomorrow morning. Is that, Chair, is that acceptable?
That's fine. That's not a problem. I don't always expect answers straight away. That's not a problem. Councillor Mears, what was your other question?
Thank you.
Page 165. Oh no, I put the wrong number there. It's 165. Number 4, making council property work. It says that the report or the work was completed last month, so will we be able to see the outcome of that? And if so, will it be published into the public domain?
Yeah, sorry, that report is actually already on the council website and is accessible to anyone who wants to look.
Okay, fair enough, I'll look better. Page 166 is the new function mentioned in establish a function to attract and retain new businesses. Is that the same as the town centre operational management group? And if not, what is the new function that this refers to?
Well, yes and no is basically it. Sorry, which point was this one? Sorry, where are you seeing that one?
That's right, page 166,
Yes.
number 6,
Number 6.
establishing a new function.
Yeah, I'm sorry, what was the actual particulars of your question, Lewis?
So is this the town centre operational management group? If it's not, what does this refer to?
Well, yes, for all intents and purposes it is. Okay. You know, we are looking at that, but obviously we're working as a larger team with centre management and things like that. So it's a great big group project as such, but that would fall under the remit of the town centre management team.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I have a few, which I've written down. The Children's Business Fair, which I think we can all agree was quite a success, and having spoken to Sam recently, he was well impressed with the quick reorganisation of moving it inside from outside. One of the issues I did identify when I was there was there were some local schools, but not necessarily some from my ward, which are deprived, and I understand why, because of the money side. Is there any support that we as Surrey Heath can give? I know they have a bursary, but is there any extra support we can give to those pupils in those schools that might be struggling to find the money to be able to help with the business fair?
I don't have an answer for that straight away, Sean, but it's certainly something we can look at, and we can work more closely with Sam and see if we can make sure that we've got more schools across the borough engage in that, you know, with that, because it's really, really important. I agree. I was there as a judge myself, and it was really incredible to see young people looking at, you know, making money for themselves. So yes, I absolutely agree with you, and I'll certainly stick it on the to-do list.
Brilliant, thank you. Actually, while I'm just looking for another question, the Queers Fair today, just like to say I went along to that, and that was buzzing. And I know that was something that the workshop organised. And I know that the workshop hasn't got funding past March 2024. And I know it's obviously something you're looking into, but it's a really good service that we have been able to give. And obviously, if there's any way, and I know the DWP are not looking to support it any further, so if there is any way we can support it in some way by looking at other grants, etc. I noticed in the papers there was a funding line, I think, for the UK Prosperity. I saw it mentioned. I'm just trying to find my notes, and I'm not going to find it straight away. Here we go. No, it's not on that one. I might have to come back to it, because I know I saw a line where it said something about helping support from the UK Prosperity, but I couldn't see the line in it. Am I imagining that, or is it there?
Yeah, we are talking about the UK Prosperity Fund, but as I said, the workshop is something that's currently under review, and we need to do an in-depth analysis as to the cost benefit and the benefit to the service users on that. So it's something that will be coming back, and you can ask more questions on in the future.
Cool, thank you. The pop-up project, which obviously Legacy did really well with. I know we've got the brick people coming in end of September. Have we got other people, because I think it's for a year, wasn't it? Are there other people that are lined up for that as well?
Can I refer that to Alice?
Alice, are you there?
I am, yes, apologies. So we've been running that project since the brick people are our second operator. We potentially have a third operator lined up, sort of subject to agreement. Obviously, we're dealing with businesses. This is their first step to a bricks and mortar shop. So, you know, we've been doing round of interviews for that. So we should have a third operator signed up for January. Then we will be reviewing the project in the new year to see if we can continue going forward.
Okay, thank you. And the last, actually, while it's Alice on there, 'cause she might be able to answer this. Legacy, I noticed in the papers they were interested in buying bricks and mortar. Is that something we've been able to organise for them?
Legacy Sportswear, are you referring to, Chair?
Yes, that's correct, sorry.
Yeah. Legacy Sportswear are certainly interested in staying in the scheme, which is really positive. And we've been in discussions with them for a new lease. We're at heads of term stages. I have referred to Section 151 officer for approval on that. There should be an announcement fairly shortly on whether those terms are agreed and going into solicitors' hands. So yeah, potentially a good story coming out there from that first operator. So there'll be more news on that shortly.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm sure Adam will be really happy with that. Okay, thank you. I don't have any other questions. Are there any other questions from councillors? No, thank you. In which case, thank you, Kel. Hope everything's all right. Okay, so we will refer back to the original schedule now. So we've done that. So then we'll go back to what is item 4 on the agenda, which is the Complaints Monitoring Annual Report, which Councillor Whitcroft isn't here, so I believe Mr Watson is going to do that on their behalf.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes. What we have here is the report that we bring in every year on our complaints monitoring, and this relates to the last financial year from the 1st of April 2022 through the 31st of March 2023. What we have seen during that year is a slight increase in the number of complaints we've had, and I say it's number of complaints. We haven't probably seen an increase in the number of complainants, which is because we have a certain number of people who will make more than one complaint on more than one occasion and escalate up there. What potentially is driving some of the uptick in complaint levels is, as we're aware, there's a cost of living crisis out there. People are starting to feel the pinch, and we actually view it as a service that we are open to people, which makes us available, which makes us a target for people to come and talk about it. It's quite often when you get into the level of the complaints as a team triage them going forward, that the complaint isn't actually around the council or something the council's done, but something else that another party has done. The team are very good at triaging them really where they can, which is why we try and keep as many of them down to first contact, and then restrict the number we get enough very few that go forward into stage 2 and stage 3, and again we have even fewer that go on to the local government and social care ombudsman, and we have found only a couple have really come back to us in the last few months from the ombudsman saying the council needs to do something. We have done that, we respond to it, we take any action they ask us to do, and we then have a lessons learned session around it, and we've got that as part of the report around the lessons learned and the details in there. At which point I will certainly hand over any questions. I will answer as many as I can, but I have Mrs Smith online, Lynn, and she can probably join in and give more exact details if it's a general detailed question. Please be aware, of course, that we're in an open meeting, and we need to be very careful if we refer to anybody by name, so please be aware of that. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you, Mr Watson. You've taken a note that I made myself, but I will echo it. Obviously, we're talking about the complaints monitoring report. We can't go into any specifics about any complaint. Obviously, that can be taken offline. With that in mind, has anyone got any questions? Councillor Kang.
Good evening. Yes, it's page 15. It says Environment Community. It's where residents complain about a contractor. Does the council have a sort of code of conduct guidelines for contractors which they must abide by?
Mr Watson, is that something you want to try?
Certainly, thank you. Yes, obviously, as part of our contract arrangements with the contractors, we would set out a code of conduct that we would do. We will obviously monitor where we can and try and prevent these incidents occurring. Occasionally, you will get such an incident occurring where the contractor probably isn't behaving as we would expect them to. We would then take it up through the contract management process with either the contract manager, the person, or actually the individual themselves around it. It would normally be, I don't know the details in this case, it may well have been one of their contractors or even subcontractors, but we are very aware that they are working on behalf of the council and representing the council, and we make that point very clear to any contractor. They are the face of the council, so it was an unfortunate lapse, and hopefully we've corrected it and won't happen again.
Thank you, Mr. Watson.
Can I just sort out some errors with Eddie? Just to point out, there's a duplication on bottom of page 21, page 17. There seems to be a duplication. But there also seems to be one error where it doesn't, page 12,
Oh, that was the bit that was
item
sent
4.
out, yeah. Sorry, that was highlighted earlier, and I think an email was sent out with the details,
lovely,
I think.
Obviously, cheers.
No problem at all. Any other questions? Councillor Wilson, then Noble, then Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. It's regarding page 17, the complaint from 2021 that was upheld. It's really interesting to read that the reason for that was basically because there were vacancies because of an undersupply of planning officers. And I think in the time, well, certainly recently, across the agenda pack, there seems to be a trend that more and more teams are now being fully staffed, which is great news. Kel mentioned it in her report. I know it's the case in planning teams as well, the enforcement team and the development management team. And I just wanted to say that it's such good news. And anecdotally, I can already see improvements to customer service recently in my ward, successful prosecutions, that sort of thing. And I suppose my question is staff retention improving yet? Is that possible to monitor?
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Wilson. Do you know, a huge amount of work has gone into filling those vacant posts. There is a national shortage of planners. There's a national shortage of building control officers. There's a national shortage of environmental health officers. There's a national shortage of lawyers, of accountants. There are many specialist professions that we have to compete very strongly with other local authorities. Some of them much larger than us, and many which pay more than us. But through the hard work of our heads of service, our directors, and our teams, we have been relatively successful in recent months in filling those vacant posts, and that has had a massive impact on the quality of services and the level of complaints that we receive as a council. Going forward, I think it won't get any easier. I think we are still going to need to remain competitive financially, but we're also going to need to make sure that we're an organisation that people see as a preferred employer, because of the culture that we have, the learning and development opportunities, the style of leadership that we have. And it's definitely not something that we can take for granted. We've worked hard to get here. We're going to have to work just as hard to retain that position. But we still have teams where we still have gaps. So I hope the Director of Finance doesn't mind me mentioning the finance team is an area that we know we need to do more work on. And the Director of Finance is taking decisive action to address that and ensure that it's the next service that we're able in the future to be able to celebrate filling all of the posts. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you. Yeah, I
Roberts.
totally agree. It is something to be celebrated. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Noble.
Thank you, Chair. I do commend the leadership style and the lessons learned approach to responding to the complaints. But in terms of section 2.14, the two upheld cases by the LGO, was there a financial implication for the council in respect to those complaints?
Mr. Watson.
I believe there was a small financial implication. If I can pass it over to Mrs. Smith, hopefully she will have the numbers in there. But there is occasionally a financial, but generally they just want us to put things right and in many cases just say sorry. But if Lynn can give the answer, I'll defer to her.
Lynn, are you with us?
Yes, I'm with you. I'm so sorry. Good evening, everybody. Just pressing buttons and they weren't responding to me. There was a small financial payment. I don't have the exact sum to hand. I believe it was less than 150 or around that mark, but I can certainly get that for you very swiftly and I'll report that back to Bob so that it's shared back with all of you. But it was very small and it was by way of a recognition of inconvenience and an apology.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you. I wonder if somebody could give some advice, please, certainly to my residents, who I'm afraid are still not always happy. As Gavin will be very aware, a lot of enforcement issues come from my particular ward, and there are a hell of a lot of enforcement issues that are still outstanding and have been outstanding over a protracted and excessive period of time. No fault is levied, can I say, at current officers that are employed, with the very slight exception that a number of areas during this report, we talk about the fact that we have relied on agency staff or external staff coming in. I do feel that we have to take responsibility for the management of those contracts and the management of those staff. And certainly I know, as a supplier of external workforces, I have liability insurance and indemnity insurance, which means that if any of my staff fail to provide a reasonable service, there is a financial risk to my business. And I'm therefore slightly disappointed that if that is the reason that we are claiming that something hasn't happened, that we've not gone back on that. The advice that I'm looking for, to be a little bit circular in my question, is would you advise that the residents who are persistently and constantly having to recontact the council about enforcement matters, should they raise the enforcement matter once and then raise a complaint about the way in which that enforcement matter is dealt with, so that it isn't just recorded as an enforcement matter, but actually as a formal complaint? Because I worry that maybe they're not complaining enough, because actually this level of service that they are getting, certainly in relation to enforcement, is not how they are feeling, and it's not how they are communicating with me on a frequent basis about how they are feeling. So if you could advise me on that basis, please.
Mr. Roberts will take that one.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. My view about complaints, which coincides with Mr. Watson's, is that where people are unhappy, we would rather they complained than remained unhappy and not having any route to have a resolution. Now, sometimes the resolution to a complaint is, I'm sorry, having looked at this, it doesn't reach certain thresholds, it's not something that the council can take action on. So there are occasions where a complaint resolution is not to give the person what they want, but to explain why the council can't do something they want us to do. My view is that if there is somebody who is unhappy about the way that the council has dealt with an issue, then I would rather they raise the complaint and that we were able to deal with that formally. And as I think members are aware, we have 3 stages to our complaints process. So if they're unhappy with how we've dealt with it at stage 1, they can ask to look at it independently again at a second stage. If they're unhappy with that, they can look at it at a third stage, and then if they're unhappy with that, then they can ask the local government and social care ombudsman to independently review that again. Unfortunately, most of the complaints are resolved at the early stages and very few end up moving on to the ombudsman. I appreciate that with planning applications, really, if it relates to a planning application, then there is an appeals process through the planning system. That doesn't mean that we draw the complaint in. But my understanding is that enforcement matters if they feel that the council either didn't respond or didn't respond properly, then that could be something they could raise as a complaint.
If I can just come back on that, does that same process apply to parish councils?
Sorry, as a parish council complaining?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair, and I think that's a really good question. Again, I would want to cast the definition of who can complain as broadly as possible, at least that it's any organisation that is outside of the council. So I would certainly not rule out the idea that a parish council could raise a formal complaint. Thank you.
I suppose because they're residents and it's the complaint procedure for residents, so if that comes from the parish council, they're still doing it on behalf of the residents, I suppose. So, and it's outside Surrey Heath, isn't it? Sorry, the borough council, I mean.
And Chair, just to follow up on that, so there are occasions where we will get a complaint from a local business because of maybe something that the council has done. And I think we would want to investigate it and resolve it in the same way.
What's one, I'm going to just pick up on that and I'll come to you, Councillor Quinn. I did make a note that there was 39 complaints, of which 16 went to stage 3, so it's about 41%. And that sounds like quite a lot going to the top level, which then obviously means it will have been for the first 2, I'm guessing, and there's an amount of time and effort involved in that. Is there a particular reason why they've had to go to stage 3? I mean, I obviously don't go into specifics, but it does seem that a lot have gone to the stage 3 level.
Yes, Chair. Not every case is like this, but what you will find, as Mr. Roberts alluded to earlier, that we have the 3-stage process. Stage 2 is normally done by a senior officer of the service that's being complained about. So they're putting their view. Stage 3 is by an independent senior officer of the council. So we're giving that independent view on it. Now, there will be in a certain number of these cases, and you can see by the number that progress onto the LGSCO and come back as not upheld, is just because the answer they get is not the answer they were looking for, they will then progress it on to stage 2, stage 3, and even onto the Ombudsman as well. So not every case is like that, and we do resolve a number at stage 3 because you have that independent review. But if the answer hasn't changed from the council, we have the process that people can come back and come back again just because they didn't like the answer. And unfortunately, that is the case where some of them are progressing from stage 2 to stage 3 at quite a high level.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Quinn.
So I'm guessing there is one more stage after the local government ombudsman, and that's to take the decision to judicial review. I'm assuming because that's not been mentioned here that none of the cases were taken to judicial review, but is that something that's happened in the past? I know that's potentially more common with planning.
Thank you, Councillor Quinn. Yes, as you say, that is a more common approach to use around planning complaint or decisions because they go to the planning inspectorate. Generally, I'm not aware of anybody who's taken the Ombudsman because eventually, having gone through the Ombudsman, it's their decision that would be being challenged, not the council's decision. And as far as I'm aware, they haven't gone to JR anywhere that I'm aware of. So I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but it's very, very rare, I would assume, because, and that should almost be in the Ombudsman's report back to the individual, which we don't see because they write back to them first. So they will probably give the next stage of process in that. But we've had none of ours that we've been asked to provide further information to a judicial review on.
Thank you. Any other questions? Just one thing, I suppose, to put this in perspective, bearing in mind how many people we've got in Surrey Heath and the number of interactions you have, to have 39 complaints, I think is not too bad. I know any complaint is not good, but to have that many complaints within that scope and the amount of interactions, I think speaks highly of the service that we offer.
Thank you very much, Chair, for the very kind words. And yes, it is. It's, as you say, we'd rather not have anybody at all. But there's also the benefit that we offer this service that shows that people will avail themselves of it. And we do take all complaints very seriously, and we do try to find resolution. And that's the key thing why we don't get so many, is the services and the customer contact centre will try and triage issues before they become complaints at the first possible opportunity. And that's why we don't get that many, I believe. So I'll pass those thanks on to the team. I'm sure Mrs. Smith is still there, was written that down, and will remind me of it on a regular basis. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And actually, obviously, the bit at the back where you're inwardly looking as well. So even the ones, we don't sit on the laurels, even the ones that we have got complaints, we're looking at them and the lessons learned. So obviously that's all part of all good news. And Lynn, thank you very much for everything you do. I'm now going to go back to agenda item 5, which is sustainable transport and planning, and Councillor Rise will be doing that.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, committee. Just to preface, obviously this is not my portfolio. Councillor Ashbury is currently on leave and he asked me to step in for him, so I asked you just to be gentle with me. So this update is the whole update of planning services over the last 12 months up to June 2023. The key work for the planning policy and conservation team is the production of the new Surrey Heath local plan, which will cover the period 2019 to 2038. Over the period June 2022 to June 2023, significant progress has been made in the production of the new local plan. This work builds upon the extensive public consultation and engagement work undertaken during 2022. 2 consultations were carried out on the local plan, known as Regulation 18 consultations. Consultation on the draft local plan included webinars, detailed information published on the Council's website, information in local libraries, exhibitions, drop-in events and social media promotion. Further details on the numbers attended various meetings and submitted comments can be found within the published report. All the representations submitted during the 2 consultations on the Regulation 18 local plan in 2022 have been reviewed, and a number of changes to the local plan policies made to take account of the comments received. The responses to these consultations, along with further technical evidence and discussions with stakeholders, are informing the next version of the local plan, known as the pre-submission or the Regulation 19 local plan. Duty to cooperate discussions have been held with a number of bodies, which are also outlined in the report. Delivery of new housing continues to be a priority for the government. However, the policy and environmental constraints of Surrey Heath makes identifying sites for housing an ongoing challenge. The 5-year housing land supply paper was published in March this year. This sets out that the council can demonstrate a 7.41-year housing land supply. The government attaches importance to housing delivery performance. It is significant to note that since the introduction of the government standard methodology figure for calculating housing needs in 2018 to 19, the annual target for housing delivery has been exceeded in each year. This places the borough in a robust position in government assessments of housing delivery performance. Past performance in the completion rates for delivery of affordable homes has been variable, which is set out in Table 2. In the last monitoring year, 69 affordable homes were completed, which means that 17% of all net new homes were delivered as affordable homes. The key challenge to the delivery of affordable homes within the borough is development viability. Through the planning application determination process, it continues to be the case that all viability assessments provided by developers are independently checked. However, where justified by robust evidence, reduced levels of affordable homes have been delivered. Another key factor which impacts on the delivery of affordable homes is the large proportion of homes delivered on prior approval sites and on smaller sites of less than 10 dwellings, where in line with government guidance there is no requirement to deliver a proportion of affordable homes. Members will be acutely aware of the backlog of need for gypsy and traveller pitches. By the 31st of March 2023, only 2 pitches had been delivered. Members will be aware of the significant amount of work undertaken to seek to identify suitable sites for allocation in the draft Surrey Heath local plan and the challenges of finding suitable sites. Under development management performance, Between July 2022 and June 23, 25 or 93% of majors were determined in time with the agreed timing or with an agreed time extension out of a total of 27. Between the same period, 91% of non-majors were determined in time or within an agreed time extension. In January 23, the backlog was 145 planning applications, and by July 23, this backlog was only 19 applications. This serves to highlight the hard work undertaken by the team. In 21-22, our planning appeals success rate was 78%, and the council was the seventh best performing authority in the country for planning appeals. In the same period, a total of 54 appeals were determined, compared with 41 for 21-22, and our performance was 72% dismissed. The council target is 65%. Between July 22 and March 23, our performance was averaging at 68%. For the first quarter of 23-24, which is April to June, a total of 16 appeals were determined, and our performance was only 31%, which was 11 allowed. Further details behind the reason for the drop in performance can be found within the report. Service improvements in staffing and levels of customer service, which has just been briefly discussed. For 23-24, further work is ongoing with ICT to improve efficiencies and performance monitoring tools. Since August 23, the service has been fully staffed and no longer relies on external planning contractors. A settled team has enabled the service to significantly reduce the backlog of planning applications in 22-23. This has had a positive impact on improving performance and also resulted in a significant reduction in the number of complaints. And consequently, this has enabled service improvements to be made that otherwise would not have been possible. This included the introduction of the fast-track planning application service, a revised pre-application service, and a new local validation list. I'm almost at the end. Under drainage maintenance, all Surrey Heath Borough Council watercourse maintenance obligations were met in 22-23, with minor repairs and alterations as necessary. There has been extensive projects which have been undertaken in the last 12 months, and specific projects are highlighted within the report. The building control team retained 67% of the market share in the borough and have been consistent in providing high customer service to applicants on building control applications and related matters. The shared manager role between Surrey Heath and Runnymede commenced on the 1st of April 22, and next steps are to form a permanent shared building control team, which is underway. Under land charges, the service provided 890 official land charges searches for the financial year 2021, compared with 1,072 in 1920, the year before. Numbers have continued to decline as the housing market was affected by COVID and is continuing to be affected by the cost of living crisis. The rollout of the government project to move delivery of part of land charges away from local authorities and into the land registry as a new online service is continuing. The rollout of the government project is continuing, and they hope to begin the analysis of our data 23-24 and for the migration to be complete in 2025. Under planning enforcement, the planning enforcement function, which forms part of the wider corporate enforcement team, has formulated an action plan to introduce fundamental improvements to practices and processes across the service, which I hope goes to answering, hopefully, for Councillor Wheeler's comments earlier. Hopefully there will be further successes, improved successes with regards to her residents. And this completes my update to councillors this evening for the last 12 months for planning services. The report and the AMR is to note, but I would welcome any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Rise. Now, I know between me and Councillor Wilson, we've sent in a whole pile of questions, and it's not a competition, but I think you sent more. So I don't intend to go through all of those. If you want to ask some of those, that's fine. So I think Councillor Quinn had the hand up, and then Councillor Kang.
So it looks like our...
And Councillor Wheeler.
So it looks like our performance with regards to appeals is very good, but on page 27, 1.24, it says 4 appeals were successful because enforcement notices were deemed to be defective. Now it says that the council are currently looking into how to rectify this issue. Is that rectifying the particular site and serving a correct notice on them again? Or is that about retraining to make sure that this issue doesn't happen again and that enforcement notices are precise in the future?
It's the former. It's looking at where the issue was and then reissuing the enforcement notices. But I'm going to pass over to Mr. Chinya for if there is anything further.
Yes, as Councillor Rice has just explained, that is correct. We are looking into reserving the enforcement notice. It's fair to say some inspectors look to correct enforcement notices. In this occasion, the inspector didn't look to correct it. Therefore, the actual notices were quashed. But we're looking into it again for the corporate enforcement team to reissue that enforcement notice.
Thank you. Councillor Kang.
Just for members to join with me to pass a thank you to the planning officers for their hard work to reduce backlog from January 2023 to July 23 by 87%. I think that's well done.
Thank you.
I'll make sure that thanks is passed on to the team. I think, as discussed earlier, the move away from contractors to permanent members of staff has enabled that reduction. But thank you, Councillor Kang.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you. No big surprise. I've got a whole long list on this one, I'm afraid. I will go through them in sort of various stages. First and foremostly, we talking and referring to gypsy and traveller pitches. Our fail-safe for that is identifying gypsy and traveller pitches through the local plan process. In our Regulation 18 consultation, those sites that went forward, I believe, are no longer moving forward. And as far as I'm aware, we haven't identified any additional sites. So I think to have the mitigation, the local plan process as a mitigation is somewhat flawed, because we are aware that during the local plan process, we're slightly stuffed in that direction, not wanting to say anything slightly more controversial. So I think we need to look at that. I think we need to have a plan. I know that we've been everywhere in the borough several times, but I think we have to start all over again on that one and potentially reconsider some of those sites that we have previously rejected, and looking at a spread of those sites across the borough. So that's gypsy and traveller. Enforcement. Yes, we're making improvements. Yes, we're all aware, and certainly Gavin and I are very well aware of a number of enforcement issues that sit within my ward. I am slightly concerned. I will give a very topical and current example. A resident wrote to the council 2 years ago and didn't really receive a response. They wrote again fairly recently and didn't really receive a response. So I picked it up on their behalf. Looking at the land, it looks to me, and it's been confirmed by our enforcement team, that it's county land. It's actually common land that the infringement is taking place on. And the response that I've got from enforcement this week is, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's not our land, so we're closing it. Now, to my mind, that isn't really quite the right way to approach it. What we should be doing is supporting the residents by contacting county formally and saying, this infringement is taking place. Please, can you respond to us? Not saying, actually, you're right, it's not us, and so therefore we're not going to do anything. So that's the point. And actually that links very closely with just how badly we're doing with the biodiversity and the quality of the SSSI and the SPAs that we've got, particularly around Chobham Common. So this one is within Chobham Common. And if you look at our performance on that area, it's woeful in terms of making improvements with that SSSI. And when we're taking an approach of not making those partners that are responsible for the maintenance of those areas, which are absolutely critical to the sustainability and potentially the classification of those areas, it's not really surprising that we are where we are with that. I note with interest the report about flooding, and again, there are a number of the more rural areas here which are impacted by flooding. We're saying there's not really been a major flood incident in Chobham. Yes, there has. There's been several major flood instances in Chobham. In some of those roads that are noted, i.e. Castle Grove Road, Scottsgrove Close, Pennypot Lane, Philpot Lane, and in fact the centre of Chobham. And our Sangs area, the main Sangs area in the middle of Chobham, I'm sorry, this is going to take a while. I'm being really brief, and I've skipped a whole lot that I really wanted to talk about as well. I'm keeping it to those real headliners. And the Sangs area, for those of you that are not familiar in Chobham, is called the Water Meadows. It's called the Water Meadows for a very good reason. It floods. That has been part of a flood mitigation plan since before I was elected, and I'm approaching, halfway through my 9th year as a borough councillor, with parish council the years before that. We haven't moved forward on it. We're not moving forward on it. Again, linked to that is our management of the waterways. We've got Himalayan balsam, which I've reported every year. I've had a response this week that we are dealing with it, and we're dealing with it incrementally, and it's getting better. It's not getting better, it's getting worse. The whole management plan, where it links between flooding, to some extent enforcement, and our biodiversity, is not reaching the right standard. Huge improvements. I am so grateful to the officers that we have and the work that they are doing. So please, I do not want this to be taken as any form of individual criticism of any officer. I know how hard they work. I know how communicative they are, and I am really grateful. But what we are doing is not enough. There's other points, but I'll let them respond to those ones first. Thank you.
I'm going to pass over to Mr. Chenner for most of those responses.
Sorry, Morgan, I was looking straight at Gavin
but I do just want to make a brief point, obviously, because enforcement does fall under my portfolio as environment as well. The point you make with regards to passing a complaint on to another authority, I think, is well made, and I'll take that away and I'll discuss with officers to see how we can tie that in, whether it's legal for us to do that. And I will find, I don't know is the answer to that question. I will find out and I will discuss with officers and I'll respond to you on that. With regards to the SSSI, again, I'll have discussions with officers as well, and I'm going to pass over to Mr. Chinya to answer the rest.
Can I just say, going through the points that were made earlier by the Chief Executive about the fact that parish councils can complain to the Borough Council about the way in which we're doing something, I think therefore it has to be completely reasonable as a Borough Council for us to complain to County about the way in which they're handling things.
I guess my response to that would be, it would be fine if we were the complainer, but if a complaint has come in to us, for example, with the issue that you've raised, which is there would be GDPR constraints on that. So I'm not saying I don't want to do it. I do want to do it, but I just need to have a discussion with officers to how that would be practicable.
I would hope that an enforcement officer would visit, find it substandard and complain to County.
Mr. Chinney, please.
Mr. Chenner.
So, in terms of the first point, G&T Pictures, as you know, being part of the local power working group yourself, we've basically undertaken extensive work over a number of years, even before I started at this council. We've basically liaised with councillors asking for site searches. We've done extensive site searches which have been published on our websites. We've basically put policies together, which is going to be more sort of helpful in terms of looking at future sites. And I think as we've discussed in the local power working group, I think we've got a robust argument to go forward with that. I don't think it would be prudent to look at the whole raft of sites again, because obviously that would be going over old ground again. But I think at the moment we've got a robust strategy in place, and we could put that to any future examination public once we submit the application itself. In terms of the enforcement matter, I know there's been extensive responses on that from the corporate enforcement team. I haven't seen the latest complaint response in terms of this common land issue. I'll obviously have to speak to the corporate enforcement team tomorrow about this and get back to you on that matter. Just in terms of the flooding issue, I mean, we had a meeting quite some time ago about this with EA and Surrey County Council. I think what's best here is to actually provide the list of the issues. If we find out what the issues are exactly, then we can actually formulate a working group with county, with EA, to actually resolve these matters. At the moment, we don't actually know the specific details of these issues. If you can provide us a list of these issues via the residents, either complaining to us as a council or going via Surrey County Council, they've got an extensive sort of helpline, email address as well. EA are also helpful. So I think that would be quite helpful to actually provide that information to us so we can work on these issues going forward.
If I can just come back on that, it's not so much the issues of the flooding, that they're known, that they're reported. The issue is the fact that there is a mitigation plan that has been in existence for an extensive period of time, that county, EA and ourselves are saying that we're ready, and my understanding now is that it is agreed by all parties to go forward with it, but there's not been a hole dug. And I suppose it's trying to understand what the barrier is to getting that done, because it's been, you know, in the waiting room now for an incredibly long time. I know that with James's Pond, which is at the other end of the village, which is another flood mitigation thing, it was probably 9 to 10 years before that was actually implemented, with extensive chasing from the community, with very good support, I have to say, from the borough to overcome the barriers and to get that done. But it took so long that the plaque that marked that pond virtually needed to sort of have remedial work done to it because it had decayed in the waiting. So, you know, I don't want this to be another case like that. We need to move forward with it. We will flood again with where we are at the moment. There is no doubt about it.
So my response to that is basically, let's have that meeting with county. Let's basically undertake that exercise, have that further conversation with various parties around, it could be a virtual room or in person, to actually move these projects forward and get it resolved as soon as possible.
I look forward to the meeting invite.
Does that cover all the points?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I think it'd be good just if Councillor Wheeler, if you could come back to me on those issues in an email, and then I can send it over to county and the EA colleagues accordingly.
Did you say you had some more?
That was her focus.
I'll let somebody else go.
Okay. Okay, no problem. Councillor Kang.
Page 32, 1.62, there seems to be a migration of land charges away from local authorities to the land registry. Is there any implication, financial, personal implications, implication personnel?
Councillor Kang, this project is a national project in terms of everything going to the land registry. There's no financial implication. There's obviously going to be a contractual process to actually enter into. There will be a contribution paid by land registry to us to actually undertake this work as well. So we would probably gain a monetary income on that.
Thank you. Has anyone else got a question? Councillor Mears.
Thank you, Chair. Just a minor one. Would it be possible, like in other reports, just have an appendix or glossary with all these acronyms and planning jargon? Because there's quite a lot in here that I don't really know what those acronyms are for, and it'd be very helpful for the future, please.
I'm sure we can sort that out, yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Mr Watson would like you to have the financial one as well. Any other?
They get them in financial reports, Chair.
It's already there.
I know. Anyone else got any questions? Can I ask a few, and then I'll come back. My one was, I've already asked you this in an email, but I said I would probably ask it on the night because I think it's relevant to those that are new councillors, and it's around the affordable housing. The figures say we should do 35%, and those that have been on planning for as many years, well, I've only been doing it for 4 plus a bit, there are often developments that come through where we should be doing 35%, and we all know we want affordable housing, and then for whatever mitigation that the developers come back with, we don't, and then we see the figures we've got here. Now, I think we all agree we want affordable housing. So I suppose my question really is, what, if anything, can we do to try and make sure we have more affordable housing and push back on the developers coming up with all the reasons they can come up with as to saying why they don't have affordable housing? I want more social housing, but okay, that's a dream, but affordable housing, it's there for a reason. We should be trying to get 35%. I know we don't. I know you've replied to it, but I think it's handy for everybody in the chamber to hear.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think it's a live issue, not just in this borough, but nationally. It's causing extensive issue in terms of delivery of affordable housing. I think one of the pressing issues is basically the viability of sites going forward. Land is expensive, bill costs are going up, interest rates are high, and basically sites are coming unviable to actually invest in. I think another issue which is affecting the performance and in terms of the production of affordable housing is the office to resi use. So basically a lot of office to residential going without any affordable. There's no policies in place to actually provide any affordable on those sites as well. And it's fair to say over the last year or so, a lot of the viability reports we're getting are quite constrained, and it's impacting on level of affordable housing we're getting. I know we all want to provide more social housing on sites, and we're getting a lot of intermediate housing coming forward, which probably doesn't help our affordable housing issue going forward, because it's not really that affordable, and that's impacting that going forward really. I think members are aware there is some training tomorrow on viability, and that will probably explain it in a bit more detail in terms of what we should look out for in terms of figures, and also how we can assess viability reports. But yeah, I think it is a pressing issue at the moment in terms of the level of affordable housing that we're getting.
Thank you. Sorry, if no one else is going, go for it.
I am keeping it brief. I can assure you other things I'll write separately on. I just wondered, please, if we could have some indication of the cost in terms of office time, writing up processes, etc., of introducing the fast track application scheme versus the revenue that's been generated by the 5 householders that have taken advantage of it. I have from residents a general. I was quite supportive of the scheme in the beginning. I love the fact that planning can almost become a cost-neutral service, and I embrace that ambition. Having said that, I've had a lot of anecdotal feedback from residents that they distrust the process. I know it's a pilot scheme that we will be reviewing in December, so if we could just have an understanding, please, of the cost of implementing it versus the additional revenue versus.
Can I just ask you a question? Is that distrust having used it, or just trust because they don't want to use it because they don't trust it?
It's distrust of the process of using it. So if somebody goes through a fast track process, does it mean they're more likely to have their application approved? And I agree with the Chief Exec's response there, but I'm just saying that it's a wider perception, and so actually, if it's not wiping its face to some extent, maybe that's something to look at. I don't need those figures right now. I'm happy for those to be sent separately. The other point to raise is when we look at the delivery figures around those major developments, for example, Deep Cut, that's meant to have delivered so many hundreds, versus the delivery figures in the villages against what they've delivered. I think I have fellow councillors that represent those areas that would say, my goodness me, we really are taking the brunt of those partners that are meant to be developing in those major development areas just not coming forward with the numbers that they're meant to be coming forward within the designated period. So just really, what are we doing about that to encourage that to happen and to make that happen so that we are in a better position to be able to protect those areas that weren't originally designated for the housing concentration that they are now taking. And then the other point is I'm delighted to see that we're moving forward with uniform. And for anyone that isn't aware, uniform is the council's planning management application system. It's been a long time in the asking. We've had instances with both enforcement and with planning appeals that haven't been determined or haven't, in some cases, even been responded to when they've gone forward to the inspectorate. Can we have assurance, please, that the changes that are being made are going to make sure that where we are in every application is a shared view to all officers with a management layer that says, okay, this can never happen again, because we can actually see what's going on. That's point number one. And point number two is, when can we as members have view-only access to that information, please?
I just want to come back on the Mindenhurst question, because obviously it's, as you know, it's my ward. There are regular discussions between members, the ward members, the officers, and with Skanska as the delivery partner of the MOD. Everyone is acutely aware of the looming deadline, and I will just refer members to the fact that training is going to be provided on Mindenhurst's kind of next Thursday as well. What I can say, I guess I can say this, is that there is movement in Mindenhurst, and it's making sure that all of the applications get in the right period of time, because if they don't come in by a specific date, they will essentially overrun, and then they come out of the hybrid permission that was passed in 2014. So they've not got long left, and it's focusing the mind. But we take that. I do take that, and I know that Alan takes that seriously as well. And I'm now going to pass over to Mr. Chinia for the rest.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Rise. Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. So in terms of the fast-track planning service, I think it would be helpful if you could provide me with the feedback you get from residents. I think it would be helpful because we need to basically, it's a pilot of this process, and it's important to us to see how we can improve that process. Coming back to your point about is it washing its face, I think it's fair to say we're in a cost of living crisis at the moment, and not everyone can afford to actually basically pay for that service at the moment. But in terms of applications we received so far, I received 10 in total, and the service we provided have been quite good. But in terms of the process, there's a clear criteria they have to follow, which is on the website, and they have to follow that before they can actually be accepted as a fast-track service. And as you know, or as the central government are doing at the moment in terms of increasing planning fees, which is on the horizon at the moment, they are basically looking for local authorities to actually introduce fast-track services in all local authorities to generate further income for the council. And we're ahead of the curve at the moment. If you look in Surrey, there are no other local authorities which are providing that service. There's probably only a couple of councils in London who are actually not providing that. So I think we're ahead of the curve. We're not there yet. We've got to finesse the process and basically make it better going forwards. In terms of the appeals module, I know there was an issue early in 22, I think it was, when we had contractors which were in place. And I know there was also a questionnaire which was missed, and I accept that was an error, and that's basically a time when the DM service wasn't fully staffed. We're now fully staffed, we've got better processes in place, and we are working on the appeals module at the moment, so that process is going to be more streamlined, and also that process is going to be more streamlined between both DM and planning enforcement going forwards. In terms of your final point about allowing access to members to the system, I think all we can do is pull out the reports for you and provide you with updates on live enforcement matters. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've got a few questions, and these aren't ones I gave in advance, but actually I think the first one is one that Councillor Wilson also put, but I want to just ask the question again. It's reference, so it's from the monitoring report. And it's page 4, well, it's page 40 of the original, but it's page 22 of the actual document, and it's the new dwelling accessibility to services, where I think you, in your response, I think you sent out this evening that they have to be within 400 metres of Frimley Park, for instance, for them to be close to a hospital. So these figures are never going to get met, are they? These percentage figures that are in the local plan document are never going to get met. So is there anything we can do to try and change that, or is it literally that's it, that's what's given, we have to meet those figures?
Chair, I've got Mr. Bartlett on the call, who basically produced the AMR report. I don't know if Mr. Bartlett wanted to answer that question.
Yes, of course. Good evening, members. So in practice, yes, it's very unlikely we'll deliver it. We're very fixed to what the AMR target is because it was set as part of the adoption of the core strategy. But it's something that we will be looking into in terms of the monitoring of the new local plan to make sure that the objectives we're setting are deliverable and realistic. It's not realistic that 60% of development will be delivered within 400 metres of Frimley Park Hospital, for example. So it's just trying to balance the different needs and also looking at it in a broader sense. So that's something we'll make sure we include in the monitoring of the new local plan.
Okay, thank you. Alternatively, we'll be increasing lots of houses around Frimley Park. Okay, I have another question which is related to that, so I just need to find it. Bear with me. So it's related to the visitor numbers and surveys for the SPAs, etc. It says target met, no increase in visitor numbers. How are the numbers measured? How do we know who's actually visiting these places?
Are you happy for me to come back on that?
Yes, please do.
So that tends to come from reports that are undertaken or commissioned by Natural England. So they will commission visitor surveys on both special protection areas, and also the suitable alternative natural green space. So they look to do visitor surveys. So it's very much based on what comes out from Natural England. So what's in the AMR is the most recent survey data, and it's based on individual sections where they went out into the Thames Basin Heath Special Protection Area and did those surveys.
So is that an assumption that they're not there daily? They're there when they pop in, and they might pop in on the day when there's no one there, or do they go out regularly? How's that done?
I would need to look into the specific details to give you a sort of a comprehensive response to that, but it tends to be in a certain window. So they would likely do it during bird nesting season, for example, to make sure they're getting the most accurate data, and they would try and do it over different times of day in a set window. And the way that we take data is getting increasingly better. So I think that as time moves on, we'll try and use more camera-related sort of assessments, which means that you can literally count every individual that came within a certain window. So the accuracy is getting better, but it would be set details for the specific study, and I'm happy to provide that if that would be helpful.
Yeah, it might be interesting. If it's something you've got, if I don't want you generating a lengthy report, if it's not something you've already got somewhere else.
There will be a copy of the report that feeds into this that we can...
Which is case, that's fine. I shouldn't have started that one, should I? Councillor Wheeler.
It's just a thought, maybe we could do a comparison of the people taking advantage of the 1 hour versus the 2 hour car parking charges at the car park that's adjacent to the Sangs in Chobham. So actually, I'd like to take this opportunity to formally request that data.
I walked into that one, didn't I? Yeah, okay, that's no problem. I'm sure we can get that information. Is there any other questions? Did you want to answer any of your questions, Councillor Wilson?
Thanks, Sean. No, I've actually had really comprehensive replies, mostly from Gavin, but from other officers as well, so don't need to take the committee's time. Thanks.
Okay, has Councillor Rice?
I'm just wondering, with regard to the questions that both you and Councillor Wilson have asked, I'm wondering, would it be worthwhile potentially providing the questions and answers to the members of the committee? I don't think they need to be minuted, but it's just so they can see the areas and issues that were raised.
Yeah, it was something we did last time, and I didn't actually speak to Eddie about doing it this time, but all the, were you copied in on most of the emails? I think you, yeah, so we can distribute that, that's not a problem. Okay, any other questions? No. Right, thank you all. I think that takes us on to the work programme. Bear with me. That is... There we go. Okay, so there's been, I know there's been a few headings changed in the leads column because we need to make sure we had all the relevant officers covered with the relevant portfolio holders. I think apart from that, there's been no changes since last meeting. Has anyone got any questions? Yes, Councillor Lee.
Thank you. So obviously considering the remit of the committee, Councillor Garrett, and also given your position as Conservative Group Leader and PNF Chair, I wanted to explore your thoughts on considering the information released yesterday by the Council relating to property acquisitions that was reported on LBC this morning. So the reason for my question is that the Conservative source is quoted as saying, and I quote, "Sadly, this is the Lib Dem lie machine in action once again, and looks like them preparing to inflict a huge council hike in council tax upon residents." So a couple of questions. I just want to see if you stand by that quote, or were your group misquoted by the respected LBC journalist Henry Riley, and will you be considering scrutinising the decision given comments?
So in answer to your first question, that wasn't a question as Chair of PNF, so I will not be answering it. In answer to your second question, there was a task and finish group which your leader of the Lib Dems at the time and myself and another council were involved in. So there has already been an expense of the council of, I think, about £10,000, I think, was it something like that, to do the independent review before you. So to do an independent review, I'm sure we don't, unless you want to, spend more money to do another independent review. But there is that document which you quite rightly say was sent out yesterday and was on the website. So I don't know what else you would like to be done.
It's your committee, Chair. I was just wondering what your thoughts were.
I would suggest, as it has already been investigated by that committee, unless there is another suggestion that we want to go through it again, I don't suggest that's probably a good time, good use of our time, and certainly not a good use of the residents' money.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions reference the working programme? No? Okay, thank you. In which case, we will call the meeting to an end. Have a lovely rest of your